Hello and welcome to Elden Ring. In today's video I'm going to share with you a couple of weapon options and an Ash of War you can get almost early in the game that are pretty overpowered. Everything still works in current patch and I do believe they're going to get nerfed soon, although they may get nerfed until this video gets out. However, I do hope they will rebalance instead of nerf to the ground as they did to many other things. And before we start, although I don't prefer to tell people how to play their game, I would recommend to either use during your second playthrough, your second character, or in case you have trouble facing certain bosses. They will definitely make the game too easy when you start, and unless you're looking for that experience, I wouldn't recommend it. First option is the Death's Poker Greatsword. You can find it from the Church of the Plague next to the pot-throwing troll you have to visit during nighttime. You can climb up here and cheese the Death Right bird using range, either sorceries or you can use a bow and normal arrows. If you don't have a bow, you can buy one from the Twin Maiden Husk in Round Table Hall and use the Radacon Sorceal to meet the requirements without respect, and for arrows just buy from the first vendor, Kale, the Santa vendor. As of this patch, it's very easy to get this weapon up to +9 using Sombering Smithing Stones. Feel free to check the video in the description for more information. The weapon skill actually scales more with intelligence rather than strength and dexterity. You can use the skill and follow up with a light or heavy attack, although the light attack is a little better because, as you can see, it creates a river of flames that can reach out even further targets, dealing a lot of damage and inflicting frostbite. I would recommend to start with an astrologer that has very good intelligence. You don't need to invest in strength and dexterity. You can use the Radacon Sorceal to hand the weapon so you can use the weapon skill and focus a little bit on your vigor, intelligence, and those two stats a little more for damage and survivability. And in worst case scenario, if they nerf this weapon, you can still play as a very good sorcerer. For the next option, we're going to use an Ash of War, and you can actually use the exact same character build because it scales with intelligence, so you can just use the same character to try both options. We have to go to Carian Manor and defeat Royal Knight Loretta. Although it's not a very difficult boss, you can actually cheese it as of this patch. Once you get in, go to this corner, quit out and relog, and once you do that, Loretta will remain still in the middle of the lake and you can just kill her like that. After you defeat her, one way or another, we have to visit the vendor and buy the Carian Retaliation Ash of War you can apply to small or medium shields. Follow this exact route, be careful not to die on impact, although there is a very good site of grace nearby, so don't worry about it so much. Visit the vendor and buy the Ash of War. If you have started with the astrologer, we already have a seal to apply it. The second item we require for the setup is located in the Lasker Ruins. You have to go to this location, go to the cellar and pick up the Wraith Calling Bell. Don't worry, there are no bosses, mini bosses or too many enemies in the way. This is a very simple. You have to equip the Ash of War to a shield, make it to have magic affinity, so we have maximum damage, use the Wraith Calling Bell, parry your own spell using a minimum FP, and then you will proc the 3 swords. When you go close to an enemy, you will deal a lot of damage because, as you can see in the background, we deal a lot of damage with no upgrades and with not high stats. Once we upgrade the shield, this actually scales, so you have to upgrade your shield using smithing stones and then the damage will skyrocket. The damage is way too high if you compare it to a similar spell. I do believe this was to be rewarding for players to parry spells, however, I don't think it was intended to parry our own spells or the Wraith Calling Bell, so they will just either normalize the damage or probably no longer allow us to parry our own spells. And lastly, we have to talk about Bleed and Arcane Scaling, because during this patch is very powerful. There are very good weapons such as the Rivers of Blood that now are one of the most powerful weapons in the game, and you can also use a very decent build for beginner with double daggers, the Reduvian dagger and an an ordinary dagger with an Ash of War to apply bleed are a very good start, although you cannot stagger enemies, you can inflict blood so fast and so good. However, there is a very decent weapon you can get early in the game by following a quest line and upgrade it with sombering smithing stones up to +9. Eleonora's Poleblade is one of the most powerful weapons you can get at this point in the game, upgraded to +9 and has a devastating weapon skill that is very fast, hits multiple times enemies, has a very reach, you can just hit, go back, and it's just very powerful and very good. And the scaling is incredible. If you get it to +9, it deals physical and fire damage and also inflicts the bleed status effect. Just to avoid some misunderstanding about the bleed, it doesn't scale with anything, the bleed damage. It's actually a percentage of each enemy's health, it's a very high chunk of the enemy, and Arcane only increases the damage of the weapon and the blood loss. The higher the blood loss you have, the more frequent you can inflict the bleed status effect to enemies. You will find a link in the description of how you can get this weapon by following the questline of Yura, Hunter of Bloody Fingers. And that was it for today's video. I do know there are other weapons more overpowered, however, you can obtain them later in the game. Compared to these three options, you can get almost immediately after beginning the game, very early, without doing so much, and they are so powerful at the moment. So feel free to try them yourselves before they get nerfed or balanced, which I do hope they will balance instead of nerfing to the ground. Thank you very much for watching, and an extra thank you in case you stick around until the end. Feel free to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more upcoming videos for Elden Ring and other video games. And as always, I wish you all a wonderful day.